Hi, and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, Mitch Simpkins, and this is Wins for Widows, where you can get practical guidance from the mouth of professionals who are united in helping you get on your feet and after experiencing the loss of a loved one. And together we'll uncover the rooted question that you might be asking yourself: what now and what should I do next? So I'm excited today to introduce you and host Steven Lowy. Steven is the president of Lowy Law Firm out of Los Angeles, California. And he comes to us with a broad array of experience with entertainers and in the entertainment industry. He's worked in this industry for over 40 years, and including estates for musical legends, songwriters, music publishers, record companies, producers, writers, actors, financiers, talent agencies. Sounds like you name it and you've been involved. Your estate work allows you to bring broad and extensive knowledge to a diverse set of human and legal issues. And so that's the piece that's going to be fun today, because Steve's had some experience in working with widows and those with loss. You've provided counsel to a broad variety of businesses and individuals, also from dentists and investors and real estate investors, etc. Some of your first clients wrote some of the songs for the Beach Boys and John Cougar Mellencamp, and they are still your clients.
That's right.
Very cool. That's so cool. I love that.
Actually, my first client was that person.
Was it really?
And we knew each other. We happened to have been teammates on the UCLA varsity fencing team together. So
Okay.
he's one of my oldest friends.
Very cool.
I helped him at the beginning and all through his career, basically.
So let's dig into some of the questions we talked about. So one of the first ones, Steve, was when a widow inherits those properties, intellectual property or artistic assets from a spouse, what are the first essential steps that she should take to protect and understand her rights? And I know you've kind of seen a few things there. So curious to hear your insights and maybe some of your experiences.
I've worked with several estates, and they go through different stages, of their grief. Being challenged by the devastating loss that they've faced, it's really difficult to have a clear focus of the land and the territory and what's going on. So the first thing I advise, obviously, is you have to establish who will have authority to act on behalf of the estate. So first thing is one needs either there's a trust, so you don't need to rush into probate or anything like that. And if the widow is named as the trustee, then no problem there. If there isn't a trust, then you have to go through probate in most states, as I understand it, and have an administrator appointed or executor appointed that has legal authority to transact on behalf of the estate. But aside from that, what I advise is to try and make a complete inventory of what the assets are. If they're manuscripts of books, if they're sound recordings or their musical compositions, you really need to make a list of everything that you're aware of that the deceased created as a work of expression in art. Now, chances are that some of those works will already be in the marketplace and being exploited, and some may not. They may be unpublished works of a writer or a songwriter, or even recordings that haven't been released, or films for that matter, works of art, paintings.
Yeah.
You can you make your inventory and then you see what's in the marketplace, right? Because you want to try, what you don't do is just as important as what you do, because you can spin your wheels a lot chasing things that are of little ultimate significance, at least financially. So the whole thing, while you're doing inventory, you're trying to kind of prioritize what are the most important assets that you have, because, you're always usually want to start with the low-hanging fruit in terms of addressing issues.
Okay. So Steve, let me ask kind of a question there, because obviously with houses and properties, real estate, things like that, right? You tie the trust, you name the trust as the owner, so it goes right away. But with a piece of art or musical composition or something like that, like you can't legally tie it. So how do you do that? Do you list it somewhere? What do you do?
You can legally tie it. So once you make a list of the works that you know of, right, and there may be works of which you don't know, and
Okay.
things are always crawling out of the woodwork, you then perform a search of the Copyright Office, is where I usually start, and you just go to U.S. Copyright Office, you Google it, and there'll be an option in there to search Copyright Office records.
Mm,
Now, not everything from the beginning of time is on there, but almost everything is. I think,
interesting.
everything after 1970s there, and then even some stuff that was before. And even if it's not there, there are other ways of searching that are more complicated, and you might need a professional to help you. But as a layperson, they should be able to go on the Copyright Office website and search either by the title of the work or by author's name or by an owner or a claimant to the copyright. So usually I would advise that they put in the author's name or pseudonym to see what works are registered in the deceased's name. And then once you have a copyright, that's the title to the work. There may be, once you find the work, you may then look up the work and find that it's been transferred to people, and that maybe the deceased did not own it or did not own the whole thing. So that's a good place to start, because then if you're then, once you search the records, right, from the commercial side, you're seeing what's in the marketplace and what seems to be the most popular works, right? Starting with the most popular, you see, well, who's exploiting them? Who's the record company that claims they have the right to the sound recording?
I see.
And then you also do an inventory of the paperwork. You look at any contracts that the deceased had, and they don't always have copies of their contracts, right? They have to, you look at what all the works are, then you match up the works that are in the marketplace with existing contracts of which to
Yes,
confirm that the people that are exploiting the works actually have those rights. Because
I see.
very often I've had estates where I came in, and when I came in, there were like 150 different sound recordings in the marketplace, and only about 20% of them were accounting to the artist or the estate of the artist and paying royalties, and dozens of them were basically pirated works.
Interesting.
Now that particular estate had some other problems with it. There was some pathology in the deceased that, rendered their life somewhat chaotic,
Mhm. Well,
and it engendered some dysfunction within the family as well.
well, that's it. So, and then, and then if it's not copyrighted, then how do they get it
Right.
copyrighted?
Okay. So at this point, particularly if you're dealing with an industry as complex and arcane as, let's say, the film business or the music business, you really need a professional to tell you what's going on. But for instance, when you're talking about you hear a song that your husband had written or your father had written, right? And everybody knows the song. They've either fallen in love to it or had a party to it. Everybody knows this song. Right. And what you don't realize is what you're hearing is actually two different copyrights. One is the copyright in the sound recording, and the other is the copyright in the actual music composition that other people may record, and exploit, but the owner of the composition will still be entitled to be compensated for the exploitation of that composition by other people.
Interesting.
Like two
Interesting.
different copyrights. And each of these two different copyrights are different types of animals. For instance, a musical composition has it's a bundle of 5 different rights. It's the right to synchronize it with a visual image. It's the right to sell copies of it. It's the right to perform it publicly. It's the right to print sheet music of it. It's the right to dramatize the lyrics of it and put it in a
Wow.
musical comedy or something like that.
Wow. Wow.
And that results in different income streams. And then within some of those rights, like the mechanical rights, the right to sell it, those are
Mm,
divided up into different places, collect that money and then distribute that money. It's like, for
mm.
instance, streaming is different. A different payor collects the money and pays out the money for streaming than someone that sells physical products of vinyl or CDs or something. So
Wow.
it is a
Wow.
very
It's
complex
complex. I didn't even
area.
know half of those things actually existed. I didn't know that I just listen to the music, Steve. I love music, but I didn't realize there were so many people
Most
behind.
people don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Aside from that, all these areas are constantly evolving and changing. We didn't have something called streaming a few years ago.
Yeah.
The industry has had to constantly adapt to the changes in technology that
Yeah.
occur, and basically put the artistic rights under by technology that uses it to capitalize their businesses. But that's another discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as far as that goes, at some point you really have to bring in someone that has this discrete body of knowledge, and your
Yep.
typical probate lawyer will not have this knowledge, and that
Nope.
I act as special counsel to estates for that reason.
Yeah. I would imagine.
If you are knowledgeable about the music business, then yeah, you can proceed down this road pretty far without having to engage professional expertise. But chances are, if you are knowledgeable about the industry, you'll already have a music lawyer or a film lawyer that is advising you anyways.
That'll be a piece of it. Well, and to kinda equate that too to some other pieces, sometimes widows die with businesses. Their husbands had businesses, right? And I think a comparable analogy there would be to say, make sure that you understand that business. Make sure that you understand the documents, the legal agreements that have been made with others who are participating in that business, with other owners and with other people so that you understand. Perhaps even more importantly, before your partner dies, make sure that you at least know where to get it, and maybe ask the question, hey, if you died tomorrow, like, where do I go to get at this, or help me understand what those are, because one of the things I see, and I know, see, when we talked earlier, you see this as well, often it's a big surprise and it's so overwhelming. You got grief then on top of the
Yeah.
need for knowledge and the need for information, and to barely getting through the grief, let alone figuring out where these legal documents are. So,
Right.
what advice do you have there? What have you seen there? What have you seen work? And what have you seen not work? What experience have you had that we were like,
Well, it's the Byzantine nature of the business, the complexity of it, and the peculiarity of how people deal with each other, kind of adds to the confusion that's generally engendered by the grief, by the loss itself, and just further clouds one's judgment and vision. And it's very difficult. That's why, the inventory process is just such a good place to start, because it's such tangible. You can see or hear the works, and it can also reaffirm, the value and gravity of this person's contribution to the world,
yeah,
because at the end of the process, stewardship of this legacy is just as important as the financial aspects, maintaining the artistic integrity, introducing new audiences to the works and things like that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
have it be in a place where it won't be exploited in ways that the artist would have abhorred, like using it for certain types of advertising or something like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, it's a long process, but in terms of just getting some order, it's sort of keeping the issues fairly simple in the beginning of assisting in how to create an inventory and how to understand the significance of it. I find a lot of, widows or widowers in this situation, that the confusion could kind of feed into rage, and particularly with artistic decedents, right? They all tend to have very unique personalities with their own set of maybe problems or ways of dealing with people, where they've
Interesting.
sacrificed personal relationships for ostensibly the sake of their art, right? And that leaves behind resentments many times. Children that were the parent wasn't there for them while they were on the road most of their careers.
Interesting. Oh,
The other thing is to try to keep the parasites away, to protect them from people that are trying to get into their sphere of influence. The art industries in general, someone that was basically, a drug addict or something, they help them get drugs. They feel they have a special relationship there. It's really
interesting.
sick, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Part of my job, and everybody is coming to that, when someone dies in this business, it's like sets off lights of opportunity for people. Oh, we want to acquire these assets. Let's get in there before the price goes up and things like that. Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
And, so it's really important to act as a shield, right? And so, if the survivor has a way of putting people off, well, I'm just dealing with my grief now, talk to my lawyer, about this, and we'll consider it,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to put a survivor on the spot, right? Well, you
Yeah.
really better do something here or you're going to
Right.
lose everything,
Right. Right.
kind
For
of
sure.
thing.
For sure. I think that comment, I mean, for you and in the work that you do with high profile people who after their death, it's going to be announced and everyone's going to know about it, right? It's definitely more so critical for that. But I think for everyone who loses a spouse and has assets that others would want to be a part of, there fortunately are people who love to take advantage of that. And that's one of the things I always say to them is be aware, be cognizant, be protective, be careful. Don't make rash decisions when it sounds too good to be true. It probably is. Don't involve people in your life that you don't already trust and bring all these brand new relationships into something. Cause yeah,
Absolutely.
unfortunately they're a target. And when you add grief on top of that, it makes the vulnerability higher and the need for protection even more so.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, Steve, because that's an important principle and that's an important topic.
Yeah, so acting as a safe place, a shield against these people, and you could be perfectly polite. I mean, it could be a legitimate business opportunity
Right.
for the estate, right?
Right. Right.
But you can't act with too much haste in these things. I've
No.
had people come in right away and offer something, and I say, oh well, I guess this really is worth something. Let's see what the marketplace thinks it's worth, and then you send out and you ask a bunch of similarly situated people that might be interested in acquiring these assets, whether they're interested, and you can get a bidding war going. Not taking the first offer.
Yeah. Yeah. But thankfully for them, they have people like you, they have people like me, they have people like other CPAs and other trusted professionals that they could or should be going to say, I'm getting this request. What do you think? And I know that happens to me a lot. I'm sure that happens to you a lot, where my widowed clients will come and say, hey, I'm being told this thing by this person. What do you think? And I step in not as their, deceased spouse, but as a trusted individual and professional to give them, an opinion and to give them some context. And I think that's so critical, especially if they don't have family or if they don't want to include their family. And I get it. Sometimes these
Yeah.
women are like, I don't want you to know how much money I'm worth, right? I don't want my dad to know or my brother to know or my brother-in-law or whatever. And so those professionals, I think, become even more critical because we're a nice third party, unbiased.
That's the next thing I actually wanted to talk about
Yeah,
is
please.
in connection with finding the appropriate representative for the estate. It's important for the estate to have unity and be speaking with one voice. And if you have dissension within the estate, it can really denigrate the value of the assets ultimately.
Interesting. And are you talking about like the owners and recipients of that estate or the professionals that are
I'm talking
supporting?
about the family
Okay.
dynamic.
The
Okay.
family itself. Yeah.
If you have multiple children that are the survivors, and some may have problems, some may not, some, may be in much better situations than others, right? And it's really, one of the things that people like you and I offer is kind of a neutral third party through which these disputes can perhaps be, and not always, that's for sure, dialed down. The heat of them can be dialed down because emotions are never higher than after someone dies, right?
And there's money involved.
And there's money involved. Absolutely.
You add death and money, and the
And
combination is not
all the
good.
past resentments and slights come to the
Yeah.
surface, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just guarding against that, and having, if there's a surviving parent, then they're in a position to not show favoritism to anybody and insist that they be the only person speaking on behalf of this estate, right? And so it's important that they that there be a process by which these conflicting claims and expectations can be managed appropriately,
Yeah.
because
That's
that can
great. I
be very
love that.
destructive, both to the value of the estate, but to the emotional well-being of the survivors.
Love that. Love
You,
that.
the worst
Love
thing,
that point.
forgetting about the assets, the worst thing you want to see is a family breakup. And unfortunately, it happens so much more frequently than it should, in my
I love
opinion.
that. I love that, Stephen. I know that comes from a place of having a good family and having those good relationships and having seen that in your life and recognizing the value of that. And you bring that out. 'Cause, yeah, money does weird things to good people. And so do you have, and again, you got to be careful. I don't want to break any confidence here. Any stories that you've had or seen in your in your years
Yes.
of experience that have gone really well or gone poorly and that we can learn something from?
Well, I have several. It's just like which ones I say. Going back to the archetype of the parasitic artistic villain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was there used to be a big music industry convention kind of thing in the south of France every year where a lot of people go to make deals and things. And they'd have the big convention center, the Grand Palais exhibition hall kind of thing. And the different vendors would be setting up their booths and things. And so I went to it when one year I went to it, there was this whole booth set up with pictures of my client's, deceased husband, big, and he was a major influence on music. He was like one of the most well-known jazz musicians and most
Mm.
revered, where he changed, for instance, he went to Argentina and because he was there, it changed the way tango was
Oh,
performed
that's cool.
in Argentina. That's how influential he was.
Very cool.
So I walk into this, and so happened I represented this other estate who was also very, very famous, Chet Baker. And I walk in, and he's got pictures of these guys up. And I was aware of this company because I'd done the inventory, and I was in the process of going after this company because they had 5 or 6 records out in the marketplace, and they weren't paying any royalties, they weren't giving any accountings, right?
Mm.
And they claimed they own them outright, right? And I went in, and I saw that the head of the company there, I said, "You gotta take these down. I'm gonna call the gendarme and have them shut you down if you don't take this stuff down." And he says, "You don't understand. He was a really good friend. You don't know what we did for him." Well, he was a drug addict, okay? That means that they helped him score drugs, is what that
Okay.
meant. They kept him high, and
And
so he could perform for them, right? And so he said he would have wanted us, to have this. He was such a good friend to us. And I said, "Really? If he was such a good friend, wouldn't he have wanted you to take care of his family?" He says to me, "Well, he was gonna divorce that woman." I said, "Really? Was he gonna divorce his son?" You know? I mean, that's the mentality of these people.
that's great. Wow. Wow.
But
Wow.
we managed to get rid of him, wipe him off the marketplace, wound up, doing some really good work for that estate. It shows you the minefield, that's out there. Uh,
Yeah.
but another estate, we happened to find a handwritten memoir from famous different jazz artists, right? And it was handwritten, and we found amongst his things a handwritten memoir. Okay, wow, that's an unexploited work. Well, we went, and I approached a couple book publishers, and we got a major publisher to put it out, and it did really well. And because we had the book and we had the copyright in the book, right? Every major leading man wanted to play Chet Baker, right? Because he was this
Interesting.
terribly good-looking, cool guy that everybody thought was the coolest guy. Women loved him, right? Even though he was a mess. But some women love that kind of thing. And so, he had DiCaprio wanted to play him, Brad Pitt wanted to
Really?
play him.
Unbelievable.
All these major stars and major studios. I'm having at the time there was the time of the Concorde jets and stuff. People were calling me from major producers, calling me from the Concorde, saying, "Well, we got to get these rates," and things like that.
Steve, they called me and I just wasn't available. I had another gig that weekend, or I would
But
have done
but
it.
we were able to do a very lucrative deal for the estate in optioning the
That's
rights
cool.
for them to make a major movie at a studio, and that was like we found it in a box somewhere,
That's so
right?
cool. That's so cool. What a great stories. What a great career you've had and continue to have. So unique, so amazing, so many great I love, Steve, that you've talked a lot about the realness of this and the reality of widowhood and the challenges that people that they face, whether they're, famous actors, actresses, musicians, or someone who just had a good life and a great experience. I love that we've really peeled that out. I love that. Any last minute, I know we're out of time here, but any last minute pieces of advice that you want to make sure that we get out there that we haven't hit yet?
Well, Um, there's a lot of advice I could give. I think it's really important to focus on the humanity and the people involved and, what needs to be done to keep this family healthy and happy and together. And everything else is secondary to that. But the best way to handle something, particularly if it's an industry or subject matter with which you're not familiar or which is very complicated or you know, what you're dealing with is at a very high level, you really have to get highly competent professionals to advise you. And once you do that, it will give you a tremendous amount of peace of mind. And there's so much stress already in dealing with the grief of everything. And on top of it, having the responsibility of keeping something together that you don't understand in the first place
Yeah.
is gotta be crushing, right?
Right.
And so
Right.
once you can at least remove the business stuff so you can concentrate on your own mental health,
Love
um,
that.
it makes a big, you know, it makes a big difference in the healing process.
I think it's so great having the right professionals around you, having a team of professionals. Let's face it, none of us have come to where we are alone, and all of us need good people and good support and good advice around us. And I love that we focused on that today. Steve, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank
Pleasure.
you for your reality. Hopefully people feel like I do about you, just that realism with you. And it's fun to see in an industry that from at the outside maybe doesn't have that. And to see that you're part of that is appreciated our
No, you're
time today.
right.
Thank
You're
you.
really
Thank
kind.
you so much,
I
Steve.
love what I do, and you know, I love people. So,
You're amazing. You're amazing. Thanks again. Thank you so
all
much.
right, Mitch. Well, thank you.